What is the problem with modern education? And this is not a problem specific to a single country or education system, but one that affects humanity as a whole. The answer can be summarized in 4 words: the shift in the logic of social behavior. Each individual word is familiar to you, but as a phrase, it might not mean much. And this image here, it seems incomprehensible, yet it holds the essence of the issue. This picture and those 4 words, the shift in the logic of social behavior, encapsulate the entire problem of modern education.
Let's take it step by step to understand what this means. To simplify, there was a time when the lifespan of technologies in key areas of knowledge, such as construction, transportation, and communication, was extremely long. For example, in ancient Egypt, the technologies used to build pyramids remained unchanged for thousands of years. Now they're almost forgotten. There were technologies for building irrigation systems, and they also persisted for centuries. During the lifespan of those unchanging technologies, many generations came and went. Agree? Technologies once lasted thousands of years, while generations succeeded one another. Let's move on. Roughly speaking, 4 generations span a century. The active period of generation's life can be estimated by the average age of a mother at the birth of her first child. You can check this yourself by thinking about your mother, grandmother, or great-grandmother, and when they had their first child. Add it up, divide, and you'll get approximately 25 years. A study once analyzed the entire span of recorded history, it's about 7,500 years, and determined the age of mothers at the birth of their first child. The findings ranged from as young as 11-12 years to as old as 61 years, with the average being between 20 and 25 years. However, this average has little bearing on our conclusions. Now, let's touch on the subject of humans. Humans are not only a biological species, but also a social one. What does this mean? It means that all living species on Earth consume resources directly from nature. Moreover, nature operates on a kind of balance, a food chain that maintains harmony. For instance, a bird eats a mosquito, and then the bird itself becomes food for another creature. Humans, as social beings, consume products that they themselves have created. Everything we use, food, computers, tools, buildings, is a product of human production. And the defining characteristic of this production is technology. In the past, as we found out, technologies in the key sectors of society's life, such as transportation, communication, and construction, remained unchanged for thousands of years. Over time, their number increased, and their lifespan decreased. Today, we live in an era where within the span of a single generation, core technologies in those sectors are replaced 4 to 5 times. This graph illustrates this concept. One curve represents the frequency of generational change, which remains constant, while the other shows the frequency of technological change, which varies significantly. The issue can be framed differently. The speed of informational renewal in humans or the species Homo sapiens is increasing. Informational renewal occurs on 2 levels, genetic and non-genetic. On the genetic level, it happens when genetic codes are exchanged between a man and a woman, resulting in a child. Since the frequency of generational change is constant, the speed of genetic informational renewal is also constant. However, non-genetic informational renewal is variable, and the second curve reflects this. Culture, including education, is part of non-genetic information. If we compare the rates of those 2 types of informational renewal, there must come a point when the frequency of generational change and the frequency of technological change align, or when their renewal rates match. When did this occur? It happens in the first half of the 20th century. You might wonder why not earlier or later. Let's examine this. Perhaps you've heard of the concept of resonance. Resonance occurs when the frequency of external vibrations matches the natural frequency of a system. It can always be calculated. For example, if you place any object on a test stand, determine its natural frequency, and then subject it to external vibrations at the same frequency, the object will begin to break down if exposed long enough. Similarly, during the first half of the 20th century, the frequency alignment between those two types of informational renewal reached a resonance-like state. However, this wasn't pure resonance. It was closer to a phenomenon called flutter, a rapid passage through the resonance frequency. When you're flying in an airplane and the plane enters a turbulent zone, you are told, "Fasten your seatbelt." During such a period, the wings experience flutter. This happens when the natural frequency of the wing matches the natural frequency of the atmospheric vortices. However, because this phase passes quickly and wings are designed to avoid resonance frequencies under any circumstances, humanity can be compared to this scenario. In ancient times, the priests of ancient Egypt calculated such period, and it wasn't so difficult to do so. During this period, humanity experienced significant turbulence. Look at the first half of the 20th century. There were two world wars, the first beginning in 1914, the second in 1939, numerous revolutions in Mexico, Germany, Russia, China, and India, and the Great Depression in the United States. Those events concluded around the 1950s. Additionally, during this time, atomic weapons were developed and used for the first and only time by the United States and Japan. Ancient Egyptian priests referred to this turbulent period as the apocalypse. However, they didn't mean end of the world as the term is commonly interpreted today, but rather something new, a revelation. At the beginning of the 20th century, the global population was about 1 billion. Today it's over 8 billion, a staggering eightfold increase in just a century. This population explosion created heightened societal tension. The interplay between genetic and non-genetic informational renewal processes ultimately dictates the logic of societal behavior. And this shift is an objective phenomenon. It's expressed in the fact that before the mid-20th century, non-genetic informational renewal was slower than genetic renewal. Afterwards, the reverse became true. Society has imperceptibly transitioned into a new logic of social behavior. You might think, so what? Society adapted. But this shift profoundly influences everyone's lives. Motivation has changed entirely. For instance, in ancient Rome or Egypt, a person could acquire knowledge once and use it for their entire life. Today, life constantly demands retraining or skill upgrades. This brings us to education. How is modern education structured? It focuses on imparting as many factual details as possible, immersing students in memorization. Success is measured by how well students retain this information. Those who remember it well are deemed good students, while those who struggle are labeled poor ones. Unfortunately, schools don't teach critical thinking, nor do universities. Different countries approach education differently. In the United States, for example, students choose what they want to study. This has led to highly specialized professionals who, for instance, cannot even perform basic fraction arithmetic. Other countries extended the duration of education, increasing school years from 8 to 11. However, this doesn't solve the problem, because the factual knowledge acquired in the first year of university often become outdated by graduation. In the new logic of social behavior, the methodology for mastering new knowledge must become dominant. The methodology of acquiring new knowledge. Where is it taught? Where can you learn it? Nowhere. This has never existed in any country or any educational institution, not even the most elite ones. Today, various educational systems aim to unify under a common standard, the so-called Bologna system. This means there will no longer be candidates or doctors of science, let alone teaching people how to think independently. As a result, self-education has now become more dominant than formal education. Thus, there is a pressing need to develop methodologies for acquiring new knowledge. If you think about it, what is our education system aimed at? It's directed at serving the military-industrial complex, striving to develop the newest and most lethal weapons. Essentially, humanity has been creating increasingly destructive systems. Our entire technosphere stems from technologies that were initially consumed by the military-industrial complex and then implemented in new forms of weaponry. If you look at history, humanity has been at war for almost all of its known history. There have only been about 100 or 200 years without wars globally. And even now, when there is no world war, there are local conflicts. Some military strategists even propose the idea of a long war, claiming it could last 50, 80, or even 100 years. And it's clear why such a war might be beneficial to them. The problems in education have arisen because society has entered an entirely new phase of life, referred to as the new logic of social behavior. The third generation is already living in this era. The first generation didn't feel it, but the third generation is now fully observing and experiencing it. This is Generation Z, born after 2000, which must master this new information. It's more challenging for older generations, but it's still possible. Today, students need to learn about psychology as well. Why? Because information isn't absorbed into a vacuum or merely into the brain. It's integrated into a system of stereotypes. What are stereotypes? They are shaped by the culture in which we live. If we closely examine museums, films, and literature, we'll notice that most classical artworks and writings are rooted to biblical themes. For instance, in Johann Sebastian Bach's classical music, you'll hear the Passion according to Saint John and the Passion according to Saint Matthew. Open the bedside drawer in almost any hotel room and you'll find what? The Bible. Whether you agree or not, we live in a biblical culture. And culture is secondary to the concept that governs the world. A group of people who studied this issue in detail for over 30 years arrived at ancient Egypt as a key reference. Why Egypt? Because it had the longest recorded history. Neither the Sumerians nor Babylon had as many written records as ancient Egypt. Even during the reign of Pharaoh Djoser, in the 3rd millennium before the Common Era, Egypt already had 3,000 years of written history. Society now faces a major challenge comparable to the end of the 19th and the beginning of the 20th century, when 85% of the population was illiterate. In the first half of the 20th century, mass literacy campaigns began, known as the Cultural Revolution. Today, we stand on the brink of a second cultural revolution, where basic literacy must be replaced with methodological literacy, to transform the masses into a conscious society and prevent them from blindly believing the manipulative tactics of the media, which shapes people's worldview. We must develop methodological literacy. This is a necessity in the new logic of social behavior. At this point in the history of science and culture, their fragmentation has reached its peak. Each field of science has developed its own terminology, creating silos. Biologists don't understand mathematicians. Mathematicians don't understand physicists. And even specialists working on opposite sides of the same differential equation fail to comprehend each other. This division has led to stagnation, and there are clear reasons for it. Once again, it's important to emphasize that information is not absorbed into a void, but into a specific system of stereotypes. As the saying goes, many things are beyond our understanding, not because our intellect is weak, but because Those things don't fit into the framework of our concepts. If something doesn't fit within our conceptual framework, it essentially doesn't exist for us. Moreover, it's crucial to constantly re-evaluate and replace outdated stereotypes with new ones. So, we have the left hemisphere of the brain. It's responsible for abstract logical, discrete thinking, where we process information in words. Then, there is the right hemisphere, which is responsible for concrete imagery and process-oriented thinking. The right hemisphere develops immediately after birth when a child's speech hasn't yet formed, but their ability to perceive images is already functioning. Only by the age of 2 does the child begin to encode those images, naturally imitating their parents and the people around them. We also have consciousness and the unconscious levels of Psyche. Sometimes people refer to those as consciousness and subconsciousness, but it's more accurate to speak of consciousness and unconscious levels of Psyche. At the conscious level, a person processes information at a speed of no more than 15/16 objects or frames per second. In contrast, the unconscious levels of Psyche process information billions of times faster. At the conscious level, you can manage around 7-9 objects and keep them in focus. Look out your window and observe how many objects you can hold in your field of vision at the same time. Most of the information we receive comes through visual images, almost 95%. Only about 5% comes through auditory perception. Even now, if you're watching this video rather than just listening to it, you'll remember much more, despite there being few visuals presented and most of the information being conveyed through speech. That's why it's better to listen with your eyes than with your ears. When a storyteller speaks, they convey information not just through the words themselves, but also through the images those words create. Ideally, if everything worked perfectly, words wouldn't even be necessary. We could simply look at each other and understand everything without speaking. Here's a little joke about that. In one family there was a boy, healthy, hardworking, but mute. He grew into a strong young man, and everyone got used to his silence. Then one day, during lunch, he suddenly threw down his spoon and said, "Why isn't this soup salted?" Everyone was shocked. "What? You can talk?" "Of course." "Then why were you silent all this time?" "Because everything was fine." Let's move on. All of us have 5 familiar sensory receptors: vision, hearing, smell, touch, and taste. Take a look at yourself and your relatives. Even within one family, no 2 people have the same ear shape, nose shape, iris patterns, or fingerprints. Why are those features unique? So that we can use them to form a subjective image of the objective surrounding world. When you look at the landscape outside your window, you might think you see the landscape as it is, and others might think the same. However, there are subtle differences in how each of us processes visual and auditory images. Those processes are entirely individual. So, take care of this individuality, your sensory receptors of the surrounding world, as if they were the apple of your eye. How can you damage those receptors? How can you distort your psyche? Only through various psychotropic substances: tobacco, alcohol, and drugs. Those substances are introduced into society to turn unique individuals into faceless, uniform masses, like products of an incubator. If you take an impartial look at yourself and others, you'll notice something striking. Our thoughts, our clothing, even our habits often look the same. Many people smoke the same way, drink beer or coffee the same way. Ask yourself, are you truly an individual, or are you just another product from some kind of incubator? Why then are we giving this a subjective perception? It must be subjective. That's because by comparing subjective perceptions with objective reality, we move closer to understanding and knowledge. But we are also endowed with a sixth sense. You've heard of this sense, but if someone asks you to name it, you might struggle to do so. Try discussing this with your colleagues, family, or if you are a teacher, your students. The sixth sense is the sense of measure. It helps ensure we don't overstep, don't cross certain boundaries. It protects those who may have damaged their individuality and begun to create something disproportionate or destructive. People often say, he's lost his sense of measure. There is also a seventh sense, a sense of conscience. This one is connected to a higher state of being. Let's discuss this further. For most people, the world is generally atheistic. Interestingly, the greatest atheists are often those who believe in God, but not God himself. What does that mean? Imagine you believe in your father, but don't actually trust him. So there is a big difference, isn't there? God is transcendent reality in the sense that he is the creator. He created this world, this reality. Atheism comes in two forms. There is materialistic atheism, where people simply say, there is no God. If you ask them, then what is there? They reply, well, nature, and it creates its own laws. In this case, people end up deifying nature itself. So, it comes down to this dilemma. Either you deify the creator, or you deify creation, nature. There's no third option. And God, as this transcendent reality, has a kind of divine plan, a providence. Religious terminology often refers to this as God's will, or more simply, His plan. Now, let's return to humanity. On Earth, there is only one species that stands apart from all others: humans. We've already touched on this earlier in this video. Humans are the only species that create products for consumption unlike any other species. But humans are also unique in terms of their psyche. Every other species on Earth is born as it is and dies as it is. A mosquito, for example, is born a mosquito and dies a mosquito. A cow is born a cow and dies a cow. A parrot, even if taught to speak, is still a parrot when it dies. But humans are different. Only one species on Earth has been given the ability to become human. There is a saying, all are people, but not all are human. What does this mean? Our psyche is a complex, multi-component system. Remember from biology class, what else do we have? Instincts. Those are what we inherit genetically from our parents, forming the foundation of who we are, our physical shell. We are mammals, after all. Instincts manifest as unconditioned reflexes. Conditioned reflexes, those are our habits, correct? Intellect. Many people take pride in their intellect. It allows us to sometimes discern whether our actions stem from instinctive impulses or from cultivated cultural norms. Intuition. This is when, for reasons we can't quite explain, we avoid danger. So, what makes up the psyche? Unconditioned reflexes or instincts? Conditioned reflexes, intellect, and intuition. And there is also divine guidance, or for an atheist, just guidance. Each of us possesses those 5 components of the psyche. However, at different stage of life, One of them tends to dominate. Take a baby, for example. Until about a year and a half old, they function almost like an animal. Their primary concerns are eating, sleeping, and other basic needs. During this stage, their brains' right and left hemispheres are forming, and gradually speech begins to develop. Babies start to imitate others, which is often amusing to us. We laugh at the funny things they say or do, but they're simply mimicking us. If, however, an adult lives their entire life guided solely by instincts, they are not different from an animal. This is referred to as the animal type of psych structure. Now, consider someone who begins to face a dilemma. Should they act on instinctive impulses, which can vary greatly, or adhere to cultural habits? If they choose cultural habits, does that make them truly human? Not quite. They are not much different from a machine, like a rover, a biorobot, or a zombie. Cultural habits act as external stimuli, and they simply react to them. But what happens if someone starts to realize that not everything in their culture is ideal? They begin to ask questions. Why does everyone around me drink, smoke, and curse, and fail to live even to retirement age? Why are there so many wars and so much misfortune in life? They might also notice cultural patterns in the media. For example, why is there always a scene involving alcohol or tobacco in movies? Even in seemingly romantic or feel-good films, a character enters a luxurious villa and is immediately asked, "What will you drink?" or "Whiskey?" Why do most movies revolve around gangsters, murder, horror, violence, drugs, or explicit content? Some directors argue that they're simply showing life. But is it true life? Yes, tragic incidents and disasters occur, but thankfully they don't happen every day. Yet, if you watch TV, you might think we are surrounded by criminals, murders, and catastrophes. Think back to films from previous century. Almost everyone featured a woman smoking. Initially, this was portrayed as something aristocratic, a mark of a successful woman. Over time, it became normalized. Then, suddenly, society realized how harmful it was. By that point, nearly everyone was hooked on cigarettes and alcohol. And now, we wonder why there are so many children born with Down syndrome, development issues, or why cancer rates are skyrocketing. This brings us to another type of psych structure, the demonic type. This might not be what you are imagining right now, and that, again, reflects how our culture shapes our perceptions, images, and stereotypes. In real life, it manifests more simply. Around the age of 14, many teenagers start to think, "Wow, my parents have really gotten dumb. They don't understand anything about life." This is a natural stage of adolescence, driven by hormonal changes and all the challenges that come with it. If they pass through this phase successfully, they will likely grow up, start a family, have children, and eventually think, "Well, actually, my parents were not so clueless after all." In their eyes, their parents regain their wisdom. But what if someone gets stuck in this phase? Let's not dwell on that for now. Let's return to the questions of what it truly means to be human. It turns out that one of the hardest questions to answer is, what is a human being? You won't find the answer in any sacred scripture except for the Quran, where it says that God created humans to be stewards on earth. Nor will you find it in any sociology or psychology textbook. So what is a human? Perhaps you've heard this story. In the 5th century before the Common Era, There lived a philosopher named Diogenes in Sinope. He would walk around during the day with a lantern. When people asked, "Why are you carrying a lantern during the day?" he would reply, "I'm searching for a human." Let's try to answer this question, even though it's not written anywhere. To do so, we must return to the topic of God. It should be noted that any church, Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, fights against the pagans or polytheism. Many think those are the same thing, but they are not. In fact, God is the first pagan because he speaks to each person in the language of their life circumstances. A human is someone who perceives themselves as God's steward on earth, someone who understands their role in the divine plan, which they are destined to fulfill from birth. They realize they are not here just to eat, drink, die. They have a specific mission. A human is someone who is constantly in dialogue with God through the language of life's circumstances. God is not a policeman. He doesn't punish anyone. When people ask, "Where was God?" or "Why didn't God intervene?" it stems from a misunderstanding. God granted us the freedom to choose, but not the freedom of will. Instead, He gave us the opportunity to attain it. He gave us the chance to become truly human. But not everyone wants to. Why? Because not everyone hears the language of life's circumstances. There is a saying, "Happening is God's pseudonym when He doesn't want to sign His name." The experience of communicating with God is not like a physicist experiment. It cannot be replicated. Mass prayers won't resolve those issues because this communication is individual. A person doesn't need intermediaries between themselves and God. Those who go to church believe in God. But there is a significant difference between believing in God and believing God. We won't delve into the topic of sacred scriptures here. God, as a transcendent reality, cannot be touched. He isn't a thing. He has no image. He isn't a bearded old man on an icon. Yet, if a person truly desires, they can receive proof of God's existence. How? Keep listening. This has been tested. And everyone who has tried it has been convinced that God, who exists, not the one described by churches, is a reality, but this reality is transcendent. In our daily lives, we face countless problems. Some we solve, while others, due to financial, physical, or mental limitations, we cannot. And then, even the most hardened atheists involuntarily turn to God. "Oh my God, help me." They might not say it aloud, but they think it. This turning to God is a form of prayer. You could use formal prayers from religious teachings, but if God speaks to us through the language of life's circumstances, then we can also speak to Him in simple terms, asking for help. The question is, how should this request be structured? If we recognize our role in the divine plan, if our sense of measure isn't atrophied, and if our subjective understanding aligns with that plan, then our connection to God is through the seventh sense. What is this sense? The sense of conscience. How can we tell if our sense of conscience is intact? When we commit an act that violates ethical rules or harms our loved ones or even ourselves, it leaves a lasting mark. Imagine committing a disgraceful act while no one is watching. If you feel inner shame, it means your conscience is still alive. When we make a request to solve a problem, if we maintain a sense of measure, keep our conscience intact, and here is the most important part, and if we pay attention to the language of life circumstances, we may notice that the cause and effect relationships of our existence gradually align with our request. This is the only proof of God's existence. Only then we can say that we've embarked on the path to true humanity. This doesn't mean labeling others as animals, zombies, or demons. But if you're on this path, you'll find that many actions you once did without thought are now impossible. The further you progress, the narrower the path becomes, reducing the opportunities to commit unethical or harmful acts. It's said that humans are the measure of all things. If that's true, and it is, then we must examine our psyche and this measure. There is a saying, as you measure, so it will be measured to you. If you harm someone and they retaliate, you might say, I didn't mean it. But that's how it works. Humans have will, while animals have instinct. We've identified 4 types of psychic structures: animalistic, zombie-like, demonic, and human. There is also a 5th type, unnatural degradation. This is when people act worse than animals. For example, if an animal tries alcohol or tobacco once, it will likely avoid it unless forced. But we, as Homo sapiens, willingly indulge. Have you ever thought about how much money you spent on alcohol? You might say, I drink with my own money. But in reality, you are spending your children's money. Money that could have gone to healthy food, toys, or education. Notice where alcohol is placed in stores. Always in the most prominent spots, so you don't forget to grab a beer or whiskey. The profits from alcohol, tobacco, and drugs are astronomical. Someone is building their fortune on the backs of mentally weak, unstable people. It's a voluntary, compulsory tax, if you will. Why? Because some believe that Earth's population, over 8 billion people, is too high. They've invented what's called social hygiene. Those who indulge in cigarettes, alcohol, or drugs, lacking the will to stop, because part of this process of social hygiene, they destroy themselves. Millions of people worldwide die prematurely because of alcohol, tobacco, and drugs, not to mention overeating or unhealthy diets. This is a process of social hygiene. Now, everyone has a choice: to become human or descend into unnatural degradation. This is far worse than being an animal. Animals, at least, have no blame in this matter. In our schools, even high school students are already consuming alcohol despite it being illegal. Why? Because of their parents. How can we forbid our children from drinking or smoking when we do it ourselves? Why must every party involve alcohol? Why is every graduation celebration centered around drinking? Ask someone at the start of a party, are you already in festive mode? They will say, yes. Then why you drink? To make the mood even better? But often, such celebrations end in arguments, resentments, or even fights. And this, too, is a significant issue in education. Although much begins at home, the family is not capable of solving everything. You've probably heard that 100 years ago, education was often separate for boys and girls. In many Muslim countries, it still is. Boys study separately from girls. In the lower grades, this might not seem as important, but by 5th or 6th grade, students shouldn't be distracted by anything other than what's on the board or what the teacher is explaining. Of course, the teacher is also needs the ability to convey knowledge effectively. But how can they succeed if there is a beautiful girl sitting nearby, dressed stylishly and catching everyone's attention? Have you noticed, either in real life or in movies, that in elite schools there is often a universal uniform for boys and girls? In some of the schools, girls study separately from boys, perhaps in the same building, but in different classrooms. Why? Because those schools know that this significantly improves students' academic performance. In such schools, everything is carefully thought out. It's not about self-expression or other superficial ideas. Think about how a typical day begins at school. Or look at my earrings today. Or check out my new jacket. Even she doesn't say it out loud. Others stare, and she enjoys their attention, while those who cannot afford new shoes or other things feel envious. Where does that leave time for studying? Look at high school students. Consider what they retain from their lessons. The answer is not much. High school graduates enter colleges or universities with increasingly lower levels of knowledge. Ask them basic questions from physics, chemistry, or biology, and it's as if they've never attended school. This makes it increasingly difficult for university professors to teach new material, as they still rely on the students having a foundational understanding. Let's move on to the sciences. As mentioned earlier, each science has developed its own terminology. But if we look at what physics does, it studies physical processes and how to manage them. What about chemistry? It studies chemical processes and teaches us how to control them. Biology? It focuses on biological processes. So, why not create a unified terminology to integrate all sciences into a cohesive whole? A group of researchers working on this idea concluded that the language of governance theory should be universal across all scientific fields. This led to the development of the sufficiently general theory of governance. We won't cover it in detail because it's a separate and extensive topic today. But the most interesting part is that this theory has yet to be translated into English. Let's just briefly explain why it's called the sufficiently general theory of governance. The answer lies in the fact that the universe contains nothing but processes, and all processes are oscillatory in nature. The universe is unified and holistic, with everything being governed by cause and effect relationships. There are an infinite number of processes in the universe. Therefore, the creators of the theory named it the sufficiently general theory of governance to ensure it could adapt to the study of new processes as they are discovered. Here we must highlight another issue in modern education. It doesn't teach us how information and algorithm sequences of actions are loaded into our brains. The universe, as we understand it, is infinite and eternal, not created by an explosion as is commonly claimed. That's simply not true. There was no Big Bang. The universe has always existed. However, our understanding and psyche are finite and limited. Our input parameters are also finite. And the problem lies in how we can reflect this infinite and eternal within our finite minds. To address this, we have two key constructs: worldview and understanding of the world. Worldview is formed by systems of images. Understanding of the world combines images with language. Every concept is an image paired with a code word. Understanding the world is therefore dual in nature. It includes both worldview and language. In the right hemisphere, we form images. In the left hemisphere, we encode them. For example, lying is a function of the left hemisphere. It assigns an inadequate name to the images formed in the right hemisphere. Let's discuss the idea of fundamental generalizing concepts. They are quite simple to grasp. For instance, a table, chair, bed, and sofa fall under the general category of furniture. Oak, birch, larch, and spruce are trees. Dog, cow, and horse belong to animals. But are there fundamental generalizing concepts that can describe or represent anything in existence? To explore this, let's go back to ancient Egypt. In ancient Egypt, the god Amun was originally considered a fourfold deity comprising four gods. Net or Neith, the goddess of matter, Neph, the god of spirit or energy, Pasht, the goddess of space, and Sebek, the god of time. From those arose the fundamental generalizing concepts of matter, energy, space, and time, which have shaped our global culture for millennia. However, those concepts have also left many problems unresolved in physics, chemistry, and other sciences. If you ask a scientist, student, or theologian whether matter, energy, space, and time are foundational concepts, they will almost universally say yes. And this is a powerful stereotype. Let's analyze this with an example. A cup. Matter. Where is the matter here? You might say, the cup is material, that it's metal. And you would be correct. Energy. But what about energy? What is energy? Few can define it clearly. Those who attempt to define it often say energy is a measure of various forms of motion and interactions of matter, or a measure of the transition of matter's motion from one form to another. In the universe, there are 5 aggregate states of matter. Vacuum. Contrary to popular belief, vacuum isn't empty. It's the primary state of matter. Second, plasma in various fields. Third, gas. Then liquid, and the last one, solid. Humanity doesn't yet know of any states of matter beyond these 5. So, energy is essentially the stable transition from one state of matter to another. For example, when wood burns and turns to ash, energy is released. Thus, matter and energy are just 2 states, one stable, the other transitional. In other words, energy is a secondary to matter and cannot serve as a fundamental generalizing concept. Space. Where is the space in the cup? You might argue that it's in its height, diameter, and dimensions. But this means you first need to measure it. If so, measure becomes primary to space. Time. Now, what about time? You will likely struggle to define it. Let's break it down. Since the universe consists only of oscillatory processes, no single oscillatory process can measure itself. That makes sense, right? So what does humanity do? It constantly compares one oscillatory process with another, creating a measure. For instance, we use rotation of the Earth around its axis and its orbit around the Sun as a reference oscillatory processes. One full rotation of the Earth is a day, and one orbit around the Sun is a year. This is known as astronomical time. We use this astronomical oscillation as a standard and relate all other processes to it. Thus, there are many types of time: social time, biological time, historical time, all of which are linked back to astronomical time. So, what is time? Time is a subjective measure, chosen individually by analyzing the interrelated frequencies of the universe's oscillatory processes. Or, as another definition, time is a measure of the relationships between the interwoven frequencies of oscillatory processes in the universe. Does it make sense? Even St. Augustine once said, "When I think about time, it seems clear to me, but when I try to explain it, it becomes incomprehensible." And no physicist or scientist can definitely explain what time is. They will only give convoluted answers. Turning to the god Amun. This framework provides a flat picture of reality. While measure is present, it's hidden within space and time. Those generalizing concepts include matter, but omit something critical: information. Why this? Because a great deal of effort has gone into obscuring the importance of information. Instead, we are left with the classic philosophical question: what came first, matter or consciousness? In other words, material or informational essence? Take the cup again. What is primary here? The material, informational, or measurable aspect? None of them. All three categories, matter, information, and measure, exist simultaneously. In fact, for those initiated, certain ancient texts like the Sacred Book of Thoth mention three categories: matter, information, and measure. But understanding this requires significant effort. Now, ask yourself, in which school or university will you hear about the triad of matter, information, and measure? Let's return to the concepts of worldview and understanding of the world. Why do we need a particular worldview? Today, two primary types of worldviews have been identified: the kaleidoscope and the mosaic. Let's explore why. You are all familiar with the kaleidoscope and mosaic as toys or concepts. Imagine you have a set of facts represented by small pieces of glass, and you want to arrange those pieces into a picture or mosaic. A mosaic can vary in detail. You might have some gaps, but you can fill them in with logical thinking. If the details are insufficient, you can break more pieces to make the image even more detailed. Now consider the kaleidoscope. It also uses small pieces of glass, but with 3 mirrors. Here's the first question: what's the difference between a mosaic and a kaleidoscope? In a kaleidoscope, you can never predict the next picture after the slightest turn. Although the images will be beautiful and intricate, they lack consistency. However, with a mosaic, once you've placed all the pieces together and completed the image, any adjustment to one piece requires corresponding adjustments to the surrounding pieces. This demonstrates that the world is unified and interconnected, with everything governed by cause and effect relationships. Why do we need a worldview? A worldview allows us to model processes or phenomena at a faster pace than real events unfold, helping us predict their development. With a kaleidoscopic worldview, this is impossible. You can never foresee the next image. Now, let's ask a different question. What role does the culture we live in play in the development of individual, intellectual, and creative potential? Culture can have 3 possible effects. It can be indifferent, leaving development entirely up to the individual. It can support the realization of intellectual and creative potential, and it can suppress that potential. Ask yourself, does the culture in modern education systems help, hinder, or remain indifferent to intellectual and creative growth? Think about your own experiences in school. Were you taught to think critically and solve problems, or were you just trained to memorize and take tests? If you reflect on this, you might conclude
that today's culture suppresses intellectual and creative potential, preventing personal growth. This suppression leads to stagnation in science and the overall development of humanity. Innovations like AI, flying cars, and space exploration are more illusions than breakthroughs, a means to funnel enormous sums of money. Addressing these educational issues is crucial. If we don't, civilization will eventually hit a dead end. Let's touch on another important topic: information. Our universe is hierarchical, and as we know, all processes in the universe are determined by frequency. Each hierarchical level has its own frequency. High-frequency processes naturally adapt to low-frequency ones. For example, the Earth rotates at a relatively low frequency, while all living beings on the planet have much higher frequencies and adapt to it. Now, imagine if the Earth suddenly started spinning 3 times faster tomorrow. What would happen? Most likely, all life would perish. Similarly, when the frequencies in a hierarchical system are disrupted, the system either collapses or mutates. Humanity is undergoing a transformation, albeit at a slow pace. This explains why older generations struggle to understand younger ones. The issue isn't just gadgets or the internet. They merely accelerate the exchange of information. We live in an age of information, with the volume of knowledge doubling every 5 years. Scientists say society has reached its limit of adequately processing incoming information. We've already discussed how consciousness rides on the autopilot of the unconscious mind. About 90% of your actions are unconscious. For instance, when you wake up, you don't consciously decide which foot to step out with. It's automatic. The remaining 10% involves conscious decision-making. When too much unconscious information floods into consciousness, it can lead to mental overload and conditions like schizophrenia. The volume of information entering your psyche is increasing daily through visual, auditory, and other sensory inputs. Most of it is unnecessary. You read endless news, watch television, and scroll through social media. Older generations often recall a time when there was no TV, let alone smartphones and social media, a time for independent thought. Now, the constant bombardment of suggestions by this do that has made the abundance of information equal to its absence. To cope, you need a methodology to select the information that matters. What matters? The information that helps you identify vital problems and find ways to solve them. Without this awareness, many people resort to escapism. Drinking more, living on autopilot like biorobots, or following basic animal instincts. Work, earn money, buy a nice car and big house, and spend weekends drinking with friends while gossiping. That becomes life. This approach avoids thinking about the society our children and grandchildren will inherit, or if they will have one at all. Schools should teach how to manage this overload, ideally starting in 5th or 6th grade. You just heard a lot of information, and it might seem disjointed or confusing. But if you think about it, a clear mosaic will form in your mind. As mentioned earlier, many things are unclear not because our understanding is weak, but because those concepts lie outside the scope of our current framework. Another way to put it is this: everyone acts in their own interest, based on their understanding. However, to the extent of their ignorance, They serve the interests of those who know and understand more. So, increase your level of understanding. Be conscious. Read literature. Seek answers to your questions. Love and be loved. Thank you for your attention. The knowledge presented here doesn't belong to this channel. It has been acquired and synthesized from existing sources. You are free to use and share it as you see fit, within the bounds of your understanding and the responsibility you bear. At the very least, you can like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your comments. Did you enjoy the material? If so, why? If not, what didn't you like? This exchange of energy benefits us all. So click, share, and comment. Thank you.